For February 26, 2026 of the St. Pete Beach Planning Board. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Member Izzy?
Here.
Member Perry? Here. Vice Chair Angelides?
Here.
Member Lorenzen?
Here.
Chair Hubbard?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have changes for the agenda today? Okay.
Chair, if I could just add a quick discussion item 5D for a CRA update, please.
No problem. Okay, I will add 5D for CRA discussion. And I have a motion, please.
A motion approved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Perry?
Yes.
Vice Chair Angelides?
Yes.
Member Lorenzen?
Yes.
Member Izzy?
Yes.
Chair Hubbard?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any audience comments?
Area over on the west side of downtown. So the topics we really wanted to cover with the board today have to do with the modifications. We have 3 major use modifications that are being proposed under this cover. These were reviewed and generally given the notice or given authority to proceed by the City Commission. The first is looking at allowing for standalone multifamily residential in the TC2, allowing for standalone lodging uses, and looking at reduced land area that would be required to support a mixed-use multifamily and commercial project. The major development standards I wanted to discuss with the board today have to do with height, density, and living square footage. I also wanted to get your general thoughts on temporary lodging and mixed-use development standard modifications. We've covered the background in the past, but just to briefly summarize, this area of the city, staff believes, faces unique challenges post-storm that are not faced to the same degree in other districts. There is a horizontal use mix, not so much of a vertical use mix, but there are properties that have commercial next to residential, next to lodging, next to office, and so on. We don't tend to have that in other areas of the city to the same extent. There are a large number of property owners who make full block mixed use redevelopment challenging. The standards at present are effectively the same on the west side of downtown as they are on the east side, which of course the east side has consolidated. It's being developed as the Quarry Landings project. The large number of property owners on the west side may make that a little bit more challenging to see that level of consolidation. There's also varying character and density, particularly avenue to avenue. I have a few maps that show that in a few slides. We've been directed to generate solutions which do not increase density or intensity, allow for reasonable restoration that is not adverse to the district purpose and intent, and does not preclude later more visionary community redevelopment district focused solutions. So some of the goals that we address with the City Commission, we want to keep this in a narrow focus, allow limited development and redevelopment of multifamily and lodging uses. There are Live Local Act considerations, raising the cap on units per acre or density or intensity generally does make projects eligible for the Live Local Act in other areas of the city. That is a little bit outside the scope of what we're looking at with this project. We also want to avoid significantly disincentivizing property consolidation for mixed use. We still consider that to be the highest and best use, seeing the assemblage of property and redevelopment as a mixed use ground level commercial with lodging or residential above. We don't want to reduce any development standards that could be adverse to Senate Bill 180 as well. We're looking at preserving density, intensity, scale, and mass of the area. The surrounding area is 1 to 2 stories as developed today. The proposal would limit redevelopment to a max of 3 stories on single lots to preserve that scale. And again, we're not looking at any increase to allowable density. We're also looking for something that is efficient to implement. This has been conceptualized to undergo expedited state and county review. There are much longer, more arduous tier 2 and 3 amendment processes through the county, what's called the coordinated review process through the state. Those take many months to go through. We have conceptualized this to not need to go through any kind of long-term review by the state or county. So looking at the first of the potential use amendments to allow for standalone residential use, this is proposed to allow for standalone multifamily residential uses only. There are much lower protections for multifamily adjacent to commercial, adjacent to office in the city's code generally than there is for single family and two family. There has been interest both among the community and among the commission in preserving that horizontal mix. We didn't want to create any situation that would cause significant burden on the commercial and office that are in this district and could be developed in the future. Duplexes and single family, both attached and detached, would remain prohibited. This would limit burdens on existing and future commercial development. Townhouse-style multifamily condo developments, so those are still considered multifamily. Aegean Hideaway on the southwest side of 76th Avenue is an example within this zoning district. It is a multifamily condo project that looks like townhouses. They have that party wall separation. Those would be permitted under this proposal. We still have the standard zoning requirements. We wouldn't be looking at reducing any of those requirements. Those include on-site parking, the requirement for landscaping buffers. This being in the downtown redevelopment district, there are also design requirements. Those would include the inclusion of things like cupolas, gables, roofline variation, awnings in the redevelopment of properties, and looking at some of those green building standards, LEED and Florida Green Building Coalition upon redevelopment.
Hey, Brandon,
Yes.
just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
On the second bullet there, sub-bullet there on limits burden on existing and future, what do you mean by that? Or and how?
So when commercial projects are redeveloped or additions are made to commercial developments, they have to comply with the current zoning standards, usually the setbacks and height limitations. Single family and duplex developments citywide and especially within the community redevelopment area, the special planning area, have significant setbacks and height limitations from single and two family that don't apply to multifamily. So with allowing for multifamily, especially on properties that may have a commercial use that are 50 feet wide and 100 to 110 feet deep, that tends to be the standard in this area. They may have a setback of 30 or 40 feet from a single family home. The setback for multifamily may be 10 or 15 feet. So it's a significant reduction in burden to allow multifamily.
All right, so I think bottom line there, then you could fit more people with that, with a multifamily in the same area than if it was single residential or business or mixed business / a mixed use kind of thing, right?
Correct, and for the commercial developments, if they're looking to redevelop or add on in the future, they would have that lower burden for setbacks and height.
All right, so more people potentially, if this went this way with multi-use or multifamily, we can exponentially increase the number of residents here in St. Pete Beach.
On single properties, I don't know that it would significantly increase relative to the district potential. We do allow for 24 units per acre based on the existing zoning. This would allow for single parcels to develop up to 18 units per acre. That's what's being proposed.
Okay.
But that is one of the things we want to talk about with the board.
Thanks.
So looking at standalone lodging uses, this is something that the district to the immediate south of here, the Upland Beach Village district, it's very similar in concept. This would allow for lodging uses that are existing as of the storms to be redeveloped as standalone uses. We have the Bella Serena Inn. We also have the Wide Waters Motel. Those are existing and pre-existing lodging uses that would be eligible to redevelop under this concept. New standalone lodging uses would not be permitted. They would be permitted, as they are currently permitted, as a mixed-use development with a ground floor commercial lodging above. That's currently allowed in the code, but does require significant property consolidation. As with residential, we would be looking at a maximum of 3 stories, a density of 30 units per acre, or the existing unit count on the property, whichever is greater. 30 units per acre is the standard permitted units per acre threshold for lodging facilities in St. Pete Beach. So that would be extended here to the Town Center 2 district. The floor area would be limited to the existing average plus 20%, so it would allow for those livability updates as these properties redevelop, but would not allow for significant expansions in floor area. As with residential, we would be looking for on-site parking and landscaping buffers and those design inclusion. And then looking at mixed-use development, which is currently allowed in this zoning district. Currently, the requirement requires effectively someone to buy up an entire block and redevelop it as one mixed-use project to be able to develop a mixed-use development. Should we move forward with the standalone multifamily proposal, we have heard from several property owners that they do intend to take advantage of that. At least one property owner from each block I have spoken to, and they intend to take advantage of the multifamily redevelopment option. So that would preclude the 86-foot tall, 24 units per acre multifamily redevelopment that the city currently offers. If just one property owner per block holds out, that would not be viable for a mixed-use project. So with that, in consolidation with the other two proposals that we have pushed forward, we are also looking at lowering the threshold for multifamily or temporary lodging mixed-use development. As I said before, currently development allows for up to about 9 stories, 86 feet above base flood elevation. This would allow for a lower threshold, half a block redevelopment, about 1 acre. These projects will be limited to a maximum height of 50 feet above base flood elevation, as about 4 stories over commercial or office, with required building step back above 2 stories. We would be looking to keep these properties consistent, really have them being a rectangular shape, not allow for an odd development scheme on the block. So we would look for about 200 feet in depth and width. And again, someone would need to acquire about half a block instead of a whole block to take advantage of this standard. So I wanted to talk to you primarily about the multifamily residential height. That does seem to be the focus of this proposal. It is what we've heard the most interest from the public about up to this point. And we wanted to get the board's input on 3 different design standards, development standards, the first of which is height. So most properties in the TC2 Coquina West zoning are in the AE10 and AE11 flood zones. They are not in the velocity zone. There are some properties on the west side that are within the coastal zone, and you can see that on the map on the right side of the screen. The properties that intersect or are west of the line with the arrows pointing out of it are in what are considered the coastal A zone. They have similar design requirements and development requirements to the velocity zone properties, which you tend to see closer to the beach south of this area. This area has a general grade range of 3.5 to 4.5 feet NAVD 88 with a 3-foot crown of road elevation. So taking those together, looking at the flood zone requirements as well as the general grade throughout the district, for a redeveloped project that is compliant with the minimum flood zone requirements, we would expect the living floor to be 6.5 to 9.5 feet above grade. That would be higher toward the west side of the district. It would be a little bit lower on the east side of the district where they don't face those coastal design requirements. Most small lot residences in St. Pete Beach are limited to 30 to 35 feet in height above base flood elevation plus 1 foot. We're talking today about, and we would like to get the board's input on the height that would be allowed in this district, planning to bring this back in future meetings as a draft proposal. Height would allow for, if we set a 30-foot height limit, which is based on base flood elevation, that would allow for a structure that is 36 to 39 feet above grade. That is standard throughout the city. In Vina Del Mar, in Bella Vista, the other standard platted residential lots and neighborhoods in our city. 30 feet is the standard, so this would make these properties consistent with those in the standard platted neighborhoods. This would likely allow for 2 living stories. That's what we tend to see in the neighborhoods on redevelopment, even for those properties that are redeveloping to the maximum height that's allowed. 35 feet, that's allowed in some of the higher height Gulf Boulevard and Blind Pass Road facing residential zoning districts. That would allow for 41 to 44 feet above grade, depending on where it's located within the district. That's likely allowing for 3 living stories. That's what we tend to see for residential redevelopment projects in the neighborhoods that allow for a 35-foot height limit. This is not inconsistent with the neighborhoods in the area. To the direct south of here is a multifamily residential district that allows for 30 feet as measured from base flood elevation plus 1 foot. that is to the north. To the south is the Upham Beach Village District that allows 35 to 45 feet, depending on the project size. The second item we wanted to address with the board is residential density. As you can see from this map, there is a wide variety of density per property throughout this district. You have the Aegean Hideaway with 12.3 units per acre, some of the standalone single-family residential uses that are currently in the zoning district at 8.1 units per acre. Many of the multifamily projects have a density between 30 and 50 units per acre. So that makes it challenging to set a unit per acre threshold that really makes all property owners whole, even allowed to redevelop what they have on the site. So with that variation, you're seeing lots that range from 8 units all the way up to 40 to 50 units per acre. There's no way to make every residential and lodging property in this district whole without increasing density, which is not part of this project. Drafting standards allow existing residences to redevelop with the existing density, which can cause its own challenges. Like I said, there can be some challenges relative to the Live Local Act that we would need to talk through, or allocating units from the residential density pool. Part of the Corey Landings approval that was passed just late last year allocated well over 100 units back to that pool. The requirement to make this district whole, so to reallocate units from the pool to allow for property owners to redevelop with the number of units that they currently have on the property, is only a small fraction of that. We would need to use about 37 units of the 125 that were reallocated to that pool. So taking the 18 units per acre that would be allowed as a base right, adding in those additional units that would be needed to allow property owners to redevelop with what they have today would take about 37 units. And again, that's only a fraction of what was reallocated from the Corey Landings project. And this just outlines that 37 units per acre is what would be needed out of the density pool. We currently have about 170 units available in that pool. The 37 would leave just over 100 units remaining in that pool. Residential floor area, this is something that the mayor brought up when we brought this item forward for city commission input. Staff had proposed an 800 square foot living area, and I'll get into the details on what that includes in just a moment. He had expressed concerns about that being a significant limitation on redevelopment. It may be an option, it may be viable for these properties to redevelop with 800 square feet, but it may not be economically sensible to do so. And I'll give some details on that in just a few moments. As you can see here, there is a little bit of variation in living area square footage when we look at the average for the district, but accepting out the Aegean Hideaway, which is at 2,100 square feet, significantly higher than any other project in this area. 800 square feet would allow for the existing residential uses in this zoning district to redevelop with more square footage than what they have today. There are a few properties that are right up against that living square footage. You have 798 just to the east of Aegean Hideaway. We do have a single family home on the north side of 73rd that is at 1,564 square feet, but for most of the multifamily developments in the area, they are between 400 and 700 square feet average living unit square footage currently. This would allow for up to 800 square feet of living area.
Hey, Brandon,
Go ahead.
is there a cap right now on square footage in TC2?
Well, currently multifamily is not permitted for those mixed-use development projects. There's no cap other than the setbacks and height.
Do we have any data on occupancy rates for the multifamily that exists now? So we don't know if there's a certain square footage that makes it financially viable. It's okay.
No, and that is part of what we want to explore with this project. We have asked our Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council partners to see if we can get that information.
Okay.
So looking at, and this is American Housing Survey, it's a product of the census, but looking at the 2023 data for Florida, looking at unit size by dwelling type, this is not new development, this is existing average development. Attached single family has a mean unit size of around 1,500 square feet. For those dwellings, as projects get larger, they tend to shrink in mean unit size. But looking at any multifamily development other than townhouses, statewide, the average unit size is just over 1,000 square feet. There isn't a significant drop-off for those projects that are much larger apartment developments than the smaller 2 to 4 unit dwellings. Goes down from about 1,100 square feet per unit on average down to just under 1,000 square feet. So that's what we tend to see, just as an average statewide, not new construction, but the average multifamily unit size statewide. So looking at the square footage based on number of bedrooms, so based on the actual product itself, looking at mean unit size statewide based on 2023 data, studios tend to be about 500 square feet per unit. One bedroom would be just under 800 square feet, so that's what we move forward with. We would likely see one bedroom developments or studio developments in this area. 2 bedrooms have a mean unit size of just under 1,200 square feet. 3 bedrooms have a mean unit size of over just a bit over 1,700 square feet. So looking at Pinellas County, the property appraiser's data of what's being built, looking back the last 6 years to 2020. In the Barrier Island zips, even apartments are significantly larger in square footage per unit than what would be allowed in this area. The average unit size in the Barrier Islands that has been built since 2020 is just under 2,000 square feet. Condo projects are even larger than that, 2,200 square feet. Looking countywide, so including the inland areas, it's significantly smaller for apartments. Apartments are 1,200 square feet on average, but condos are holding out at around 2,000 square feet for new development. I did want to say that we don't see a lot of multifamily development in St. Pete Beach. There hasn't been a ton of new development of multifamily projects in the last 20 or so years. There was one proposal that moved forward for approval late last year. It is pending site plan submittal. This is all the way down in Paso Grill, 100 Paso Grill Way. They're proposing 6 new units, 2 existing, which are being retained at the back of the property. They are proposing unit sizes of 714 square feet of living area. That does include the ground level, the porch areas, the parking. That is the actual living square footage, excluding the vertical circulation, the stairs inside the units themselves. This would provide a project with a total site density of 28.6 units per acre. That would exceed what the base density would be allowed in this district, but that would be in range for what would be allowed with the density pool allocation. They are meeting the same impervious surface ratio requirements that would be imposed in the TC2 district. They are including some site amenities as well, and they are compliant with the height limitation that would be subject to the TC2 zoning district.
Kind of a side question, if I could. Is this one have to go up for a cup, or is this strictly zoning?
This is strictly zoning. So looking at the buildability assessment for the TC2 Coquina West area, the average platted lot size in this area is 50 by 107.5 square feet, just under 5,500 by 107.5 feet, just under 5,500 square feet. Of that 5,375 square feet, about 55% of the lot area, 50 to 55%, is accounted for by permeability requirements, as well as the design articulation and the parking requirements. That leaves about half the lot that could be developed on, which could support a building when meeting the other development requirements. That's looking at a maximum development scenario, assuming that the developer does not choose to place an at-grade pool or other amenities that might be provided for these properties. So looking at the potential living square footage, a 3-unit, 2 living story building could have a realistic gross floor area of up to 1,750 square feet. That's not based on any cap that the city would implement. That's just based on the reasonable development potential for a lot that is being developed at the 50 by 107.5 dimensions.
Does that allow for parking, or?
That would allow that would not account for parking, so there would be an additional level for the parking and storage.
Okay.
So looking at what's included in living square footage, we would recommend that whether there's a cap placed or not, living square footage would exclude any exterior balconies. It would include that ground level parking, storage, and access. It would also exclude the minimum vertical circulation that would be required to access an upper story living level. It would include the bedroom, the bathroom, closets, eating and drinking areas, and so on. But it would exclude those exterior elements, those non-habitable elements down at the ground level, as well as the minimum vertical circulation for development. And here's a few example single lot development options. This would be a property not located along Corey Avenue. Corey Avenue does have a build-to requirement. We would propose allowing for those multifamily projects up to 3 units, allowing for parking along the frontage. You could see the type of development, again, canceling out the minimum articulation requirements and the other requirements that come along with this. This is a property that could potentially be built, meeting the setback requirements, meeting the impervious surface ratio and buffer requirements. This could be a potential development along 76th or 73rd Avenues. Looking at Corey Avenue, there is that build-to requirement, so that does make it challenging. It's likely that the development would need to be shifted closer to the street, have the parking under the building parallel to the front property line. You might see more of a townhouse-style development just with the inability to separate off the floors given the limited living square footage in these projects. So I did want to point out that there is no requirement to limit floor area for residential development in St. Pete Beach. Most zoning districts citywide do not have a strict limit on floor area. This was an idea, this was a concept for this district that would allow for development that's in line with the existing developed square footage of properties, not accounting for that level that needs to be elevated to allow for parking and storage. There are other dimensional requirements, of course, that apply to lots, height, impervious surface, setbacks. Those can serve as an indirect limitation on floor area. Floor area limitations can be used to incentivize certain types of development, like single-bedroom apartments. As I pointed out before, a cap of 800 square feet would likely lead to studio and single-bedroom apartment-style development. Setting a floor area standard too low can disincentivize redevelopment. That was a concern of the mayor at the last meeting, that setting an 800 square foot cap could potentially disincentivize townhouse-style development, those larger projects that we tend to see being built elsewhere in Pinellas County. So our main questions for you this afternoon, we would like your input on the proposed residential density. We are proposing 18 units per acre with the ability to request from the density pool the 5 feet that would allow for 2 to 3 living stores and construction to the north and south of this district. 3 stories is likely to allow units of a median barrier island new construction size. It's 2,000 square feet, absent floor area limitations. And the third item that we'd like your input on is whether there should be a floor area limitation, if any. As I mentioned before, staff had proposed an 800 square foot per unit of living space. That is not a requirement. That is something that could be increased, could be done away with entirely and be left to the height, lot coverage, and setback requirements. This would allow for lower living square footages, which could incentivize new flood compliant rentals, 1 to 2 bedroom development, which St. Pete Beach does lack in large number, especially for newer, more recent development. It could also include incentives for lower density but higher floor area projects, as I pointed out before, allowing for that partial block consolidation, but potentially a lower density of 12 units or 15 units per acre, but allow for those units to have a higher floor area. So in terms of next steps, we would like to get the input of the board both on these concepts generally, as well as the density, height, and floor area standards that I mentioned on the previous slide. We would like to bring these items back for input in March or April. We are likely looking at a workshop or a hybrid public forum setup. We would like to get the community's input on this as well. I have been speaking with several of the property owners in the vicinity. I have shared with this. Many did turn out for the presentation last month. I went to City Commission, but we would like to get them involved as well and have a input session for them as this develops. this may be a separate meeting depending on the feedback we get this evening. I really just wanted to bring this forward to the board, get your initial input, and move forward from there. So happy to take any questions and look forward to your input.
I got a couple. So, like many things we do in the city, I found we kind of put the chicken before the egg thing. You know, you're asking us to give input, and I will on what you've asked. But without a long-term vision of what's already been approved, so we're going to go to the public and talk to them about it. But in the meantime, we're going to hash out some standards when maybe this is not what the public really wants for that area of St. Pete Beach. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, don't get me wrong. I'm very process-driven, right? And to me, I would think that in the city, we would understand or know or come to some agreement or disagreement, but at least there was a plan moving forward that said this area is now going to be this. Now, you guys go figure out the limits that you want to put on it that we think we need, right? And you answered one of my questions on, you know, what do we need in this city? It sounds like we need 1 and 2 bedroom rental spaces, if that's what we're lacking. But that doesn't necessarily answer the question, is what do we want in the city? So, go ahead.
If I remember correctly, you had outreach to these property owners last fall, and
February 26th, there was a meeting for the owners in this location, and I did attend that meeting, so.
I think the outcome was
6 of what year, 2025, last year?
No, I thought it was this year.
Today is February 26th.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm the wrong one.
yeah.
Apologize.
I feel like I remember the outcome was the owners in that area were
Yeah, the owners.
kind of down on commercial because there's a lot of vacant commercial already, and they also weren't keen on mixed use. So is this the outcome of, hey, the people that own these properties aren't moving forward, and we want to give them something?
And and I'm sorry for not giving that context. We did start this with a workshop and a public forum with the community. We did have many property owners turn out, and there was interest in allowing for multifamily standalone redevelopment. A lot of these concepts came out of that meeting. We have kept that neighborhood engaged during this process, and we haven't really worked through the direct development standards. That is something that, like I mentioned, we want to come back with a workshop. We really want to talk this through and give you more detail, but the input we were seeking from the planning board tonight is really on conceptually the development standards, but I think the actual use standards that we've discussed tonight, we have engaged the community on that, and I believe there is support.
I understand. I just feel like, you know, you ask us for things in several of these meetings. You know, what's missing always is the why and the who. Who's kind of pushing this, and then the why.
Well,
So
I can answer that because I attended the meeting that they had with these owners. And the thing I got out of it was that after the hurricane, they wanted to basically be grandfathered. They wanted to be able to get back to where they were. And I think the way the land development code, they would have had to change. There were restrictions that were keeping them from being able to just get back whole. And that was really the big driver that I saw.
That doesn't really make sense because, you know, if they're going to change and develop something like this, they would have to meet current standards anyway when they redevelop. But,
That's the question, and that's,
you know, so, okay, I want to get off track, but it's very discouraging to me that, you know, when we come in here and we get a briefing, we don't know the full background on why and where we're going and why we're going there. You know, if you would have started out and said, hey, the vision of this city that has been, you know, blessed by the commission or what have you is that Coquina West DC2 is going to be residential, multifamily. That's where the city wants us to go because we've gone through this process. Now you guys go give us your input on the standards. It would make sense. I mean, I'll still give you my input on the standards, but, you know, I don't know. I sit here wondering who's driving this, you know, and why. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea, I mean, because it all needs to be kind of redeveloped and revitalized. It, you know, the whole Gulf Boulevard does, right? But, you know, we're constantly putting the cart before the horse on things, and we're not following a process that leads everyone right down the road of why we're doing something. Because we can't ever answer the question why. And the answer can't be because the people that currently are living there, or the current property owners want it. That's not, they don't get the full say, right? The city and the commission needs to make this. But saying that, based on one of your bullets there, that we need in this city 1 and 2 bedroom rentals, if we're short on those, I think your plan is okay. I have no real objections. The only objection I have is how we're getting there and why. Because this may not be the right thing for this city in the end, because I don't think there's been enough discussion about it. So I'll yield the rest of my time.
That's an interesting point you brought up. As I listened to your presentation, and thank you, it's well put together. I'm trying to figure out what the genesis of this is. Exactly. Who started this, and what problem are they trying to solve? If it's, was there somebody in particular in the commission that, you know, their district or the mayor or somebody said, hey, we got to get this fixed? How did this get going?
So I can only speak from my side. I know that post-storm, I did have several property owners reach out to me and ask, what can I do? You know, what can I redevelop with? And the option currently at their parcel size is office or commercial. Many of these property owners have 1, 2, 3 bedroom or unit developments. And from that, I know it went on to the commission. I don't know who directed that, but we, you know, we set up a community workshop. We got their input. These are things that I think there is a, you know, a joining of zoning and the community desires here as well. I do think that there is some demand and there is interest in multifamily development in this jurisdiction. It's not something that's currently allowed, and I think there are significant unrealized challenges with the west side that we haven't seen replicated over on the east side. We drafted these standards that allow for the mixed use consolidation back in the mid 2000s. It's obviously been realized in Corey Landings, and I think even well over a decade ago now, there was a project that would have proposed the same type of development that Corey Landings was undertaking. We haven't seen that consolidation over on the west side, and it makes it very challenging to redevelop the area if new commercial development isn't viable. If new office development isn't viable, there is no current option except for full block consolidation with a mixed-use project based on the current zoning. This would allow for additional options. It doesn't take anything away. It still allows for the multifamily full block redevelopment. It allows for the lodging uses to remain, potentially redevelop, but it allows for that standalone multifamily that does not exist today. So
in Brandon Berry's crystal ball, pre-Helena snapshot of TC2, and 5 years from now, if this goes through and we all nod our heads and the commission agrees, what do you see changing?
I do see, based on input, especially the properties along 76 at the north and the south ends, I do see redevelopment as multifamily. I know there's been interest in smaller townhouse style projects along those areas of the district that face residential. Immediately north of here and immediately south are residential zoning districts. Along Corey Avenue, it could go either way. There could be a shift from the existing commercial over to residential, but most of the interest I've heard at this point is in redevelopment along 76th and 3rd.
So mostly privately owned, or are we talking more condos?
They are privately owned. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there a requirement that parking be on site as these are redeveloped?
Not necessarily. If someone were to build a parking garage, they could always have a shared parking agreement with the garage, but unless there's some shared facility or surface parking lot, it needs to be on site on the property.
Oh, okay. So there is a parking requirement. You cannot assume street parking is
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
So with some of these densities on your chart, like one of these corner units is 437 square feet. That's the highest one at 57 units per acre. I assume that's just very, very tiny efficiency apartments that, is that able to be redeveloped in a way that this plan envisions? Is there enough lot size to produce anything?
There's going to be a challenge, especially, well, even at 3 stories of living area with all of these properties redeveloping on a single parcel, there might be a need to consolidate. I have spoken to a few of the property owners on 76th, and their initial calculations, it would work for them at the 2 to 3 stories. But there are properties, especially the ones that are 5, 6 units to a lot, it's going to be a challenge. So.
Has anyone told you if they cannot build 3 stories, it's an impossible situation for them?
No, and I think 3 stories would be more valuable or more viable if there were to be a higher floor area cap at 800 square feet. There isn't necessarily the need for 3 living stories.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What's the purpose behind the floor area cap? Is that just to reduce, I guess, or to make them more affordable, or to reduce the number of luxury?
Potentially. I mean, that wasn't necessarily the intent. The intent was just to preserve the existing development pattern and scale and mass of the district to a reasonable extent. Allowing a living unit to redevelop with 400 square feet only would be a significant challenge. But, it is generally preserving the living square footage with the exception of 2 properties in the district. So.
But it's a ceiling, right? Not a floor?
It's a ceiling, correct. The floor is just the Florida Building Code.
Okay. And what's that?
It's small. I think it's about 200 square feet.
Oh, wow.
It's, there's a requirement for a bathroom and a sleeping area, but it's very small.
Because I know if the concern is density as well, maybe establishing some kind of floor could be useful as well.
Now, if Florida goes forward with this micro housing thing, all of this is irrelevant, right? Because the state would overrule and they could put 4 units, 5 units.
That would actually be I believe as it's written, it's only for single families, so they could build a single family home that has 4 units within it, but this would be a multifamily only district, and because we're introducing a new permission, I don't know that it would
So
directly.
we would not relax that requirement on this district.
I don't think so, unless the board or commission wanted to move forward with standalone single family, because that would always be an option if we were to introduce that.
Okay.
That's the part that's frustrating to me, though, is you were saying, like, we don't know, do we as a city want to have more residential units? Do we want, 100 new residents in here, or do we want 50? And we keep talking. I mean, there's all this talk about traffic and all this talk about this and all this talk about that. So when you're talking about the floor limits and stuff, that'll take you down the road of either someone's going to put a duplex or a triplex, right? But then you have more residents and more cars. So it's without like a vision of what we want, in the city, it's just hard to make these decisions, or give these inputs. I mean, obviously for a larger property, a duplex maybe, with more square foot, that certainly benefits a certain group of people in this city. So, it's just, what do we want? Do we want more residents? Which half of them will be snowbirds, and that's okay too. What do we want? What's our need?
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't, what's our requirement? We're coming up with a solution without knowing the requirement, It's just very hard.
I don't think I can agree with all of that, because having read a lot of the detail and the comp plans and the things that we have, I feel like we do have direction. For example, we know that the west side of Gulf Boulevard is where the hotels go, large resort district, and not so much on the other side where it's more residential in places. I just feel that these people just want a grandfather. They're doing what they're doing now, and if they go up to the current requirements, they can't do what they're doing now. And I'd like to see people be able to get back into their homes and back into their lives. That's That's all they were asking for.
And this is on me for maybe not explaining this clearly, but the current allowable density in this district is 24 units an acre. That is the residential allowable redevelopment density if each of these blocks were to be redeveloped. We have about 6 acres here, so that works out to be about 150 units that would be allowed district-wide should every single block be redeveloped. This would only allow for standalone multifamily at 18 units per acre. This is one of the districts that is currently eligible for the residential density pool, just as was allocated to the Quarry Landings project. So truthfully, although it doesn't necessarily reflect the on-the-ground reality of the situation, if we were to set this at 18 units per acre, allocate from the density just to get back to that make whole, allow for them to redevelop with what they have, that would actually result in a district-wide decrease in the number of units that are potentially eligible to these properties. So, and I don't think I explained that clearly, but we're not going up from where we are now. We're just looking at allowing for those individual property owners to take advantage of the benefits that would only currently be eligible to those who consolidate a whole block.
Great. But you understand, I'm not against going up or down. I just would like to know where we want to go. All right.
I'd like to see more foot traffic on Corey and have that west side of Corey kind of look the way it used to, with restaurants and some semblance of, you go there on the weekend and it's happening, and then after the storm I feel like this whole area kind of looks weird and none of it really makes sense. So I think that allowing some small townhouses like what you see popping up all over the place downtown, I think that could invite some people, whether they're snowboards or young families, to be here, and that might help improve foot traffic on Corey and help put more businesses on the street.
If it brings Willie's back, I would vote for it.
Exactly.
Brandon, as unrealistic as it is, if someone were to develop one of these lots into commercial or mixed use, what is the height limits they would be subjected to
Standalone commercial would be 28 feet.
above BFE?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, for me, I don't really see any big issues. The only thing you kind of mentioned that I'm not really understanding why we even need a ceiling on floor area limitation. What's the purpose of saying there's an 800 square foot limit?
It can be another way to directly or indirectly influence the scale and mass of buildings. It would do more to bound the size of the projects and potentially allow for some of those higher quality design, feature implementation. It's not the only way to do it. We do have the design requirements. We have height, we have setbacks, lot coverage. Those indirectly influence the size of the buildings, but it's also to keep it more in line with the square footages that we currently have out there, if that is what the city is looking to move forward with. We currently have a lot more flexibility than we would have if we were to implement this and try to scale it back. It's very difficult to take property rights away once they've been given. So 800 square feet, I felt, was a viable make whole provision for all but 2 of the properties, and they would still be eligible to redevelop up to their existing living square footage plus 20%. So no one would lose out with 800 square feet. It would just allow for, keeping the ceiling a little bit lower on redevelopment.
Are there other areas of the city where we have a square foot limit like that?
Yes.
Not including the large resort district or,
The boutique hotel condo district just south of there, just south of County Park on the west side, they have a 750 square foot unit size limit.
I personally am not opposed to eliminating that 800 square foot limit if we have a reasonable height allowance and someone can build a very nice project that is more square footage per floor. I mean, if it's 3 1,000 square foot units and it's a really nice project, that seems to accomplish quite a bit over trying to cram a bunch of tiny apartments into as small a space as possible.
I'm with you.
I agree with that.
That's That is the opinion.
If I could also get the
The
boards,
consensus that there would be no floor area or no.
Limitation.
No maximum square footage? Just take the square footage out, the FAR, okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And height, I mean, if 28 foot is commercial already, 30 foot seems more than reasonable to me.
Yeah.
I would agree.
okay. All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to discussion item 5B. I asked for this one to be added because I was hoping to get just an update on how SB 840 is progressing, its current language, how it would impact. As my idea was that not only the boards, but the commission and city staff could potentially be working on ideas in anticipation of that possibly going forward, because should we have a limited window of time where we're allowed to make changes that have been prohibited for 3 years, that would be the time you want to get these things noticed and go through the process, not miss that opportunity. And hopefully a hurricane doesn't come our way, but if even the track hits us, then it could push us another 2 years unable to do anything. So that's the origin of this request, and I'll hand it over to you, Brandon.
So unfortunately, that bill does not currently have a House companion. City attorney might have a little bit more detail about how that works in reconciliation.
So last week, the Senate Bill 840 passed the full Senate floor, 38 to nothing. And it's been sent over to the House, and the House has not yet brought up a companion bill to match it. So we'll have to keep an eye on it and see if that happens. There are some other bills that are related, sort of. One of them carves out 13 counties in the Florida Panhandle, but doesn't help us. And there is a House Bill 217 and 1465, which don't really help us. So we're looking for Senate Bill 840 by DeSiglia to get transferred now to the House committee, and hopefully it comes back. If the House number takes it up, then it would unfortunately die.
Okay.
So the holdup is in the House.
Okay.
And with that, the 1 year post-storm moratorium would still apply, but it's significantly less restrictive moving forward for future events. We can still make changes to the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code, even if it's more restrictive. What it's going to limit, based on what is currently drafted at least, it would prohibit us from extending issuance timeframes, and it would also, in most cases, unless there's a moratorium due to sewer, stormwater, some other facet for which we can institute a moratorium, we can't prevent the repair, but we would be able to look at new development and redevelopment. So someone could restore their building, but you could potentially look at changes to redevelopment and development.
Okay.
So.
Would that include potentially like things the Historic Preservation Board are interested in, where something moves from recommended to required? Is that the kind of thing that could go forward at that point?
Yes, we still need to be considerate of some of the other laws that involve, changing.
Harris Act and things.
Right,
Sure.
but it would definitely open that up.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Some of the main problems we have is procedural steps, where someone says, well, something is more procedurally burdensome. I have to now go to the Historic Preservation Board for a place I didn't have to go before,
Okay.
things like that.
All right, thank you.
Impact evaluation of your properties.
Okay. All right, we will move on to 5C, artificial turf preemption.
Pull the PowerPoint. I wanted to bring this up because I know the board, for the members who were on the board at the time, you probably remember early last year we were bringing forward an ordinance to provide some limitations for artificial turf. That was, of course, pre-Senate Bill 180, and we are now preempted, at least in terms of single-family turf regulations. So you previously discussed this topic. We put together an ordinance, but we put it on hold early last year upon learning of Senate Bill 712. It's now adopted, which preempted synthetic turf regulations for single-family properties under 1 acre upon adoption of a regulating rule by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. That rule was proposed in early January. Looks to be in relatively final form. It is not effective yet, but I believe it should be effective any day now. It's been a little over a month now. So I wanted to point out some of the highlights of the rule. Turf is still prohibited in certain areas, even on single-family lots. It is prohibited in swales, typically in the side yards, within the drip line of trees, so the mature canopy line of trees, unless certified by an arborist that it will not adversely affect the turf. Within 10 feet of the mean high water line where there is no seawall. If there is a seawall, of course most of our properties have seawalls, it can go right up to the seawall cap. There is no limitation on setback when a seawall exists. It's not allowed in the dunes. It would also not be allowed where it would compromise healthy Florida-friendly trees. There are still requirements for permeability. There are 2 things within this rule that cities can still regulate. The subgrade permeability and porosity can still be regulated by cities. We can set limits if we wanted 10 inches per hour as the standard. We can also require that infill be silica, rock shell, or other natural materials. One of the benefits of engineered turf, especially if it's on a well-engineered subgrade, is that it does provide for a higher percolation rate up to 6 inches an hour. On the sandy soil that we tend to have here in St. Pete Beach, that natural percolation rate is more in the 1 to 2 inches per hour range. During a typical rainstorm, we see about 1 inch of rain an hour. Severe thunderstorms can be 2 to 3 inches per hour. Tropical storms can be 3 to 6. So having that higher percolation rate, as long as it has somewhere to go, can be a good thing. That can be a benefit of turf. In terms of applicability, this does apply only to single-family residences on lots of under 1 acre. That's virtually all single-family properties in St. Pete Beach. In some areas of Florida, you tend to have the 1 home per 5 acre standard, especially in rural areas. We obviously don't have that here. This would apply to virtually every single-family property in the city. There are no historic exemptions, so historically designated properties would be eligible to install turf. It has no direct impact on multifamily or commercial uses as the rule is written or as the bill was adopted. It can provide a guide for those uses, some of the rules that were included in that FDEP rule. So we've discussed this at length. I know it came up when we were reviewing the ordinance early last year. Artificial turfs can provide for better engineered drainage, especially on sandy soil with under drains. It can be easier to maintain, at least in the short term, and it can conserve water. Natural turfs, of course, are not made from plastics. That's one of the main concerns, and the one of our regional planning council groups had put together a meta-analysis of the research into turfs, and the plastic was the main concern. Natural turfs, of course, don't reach the extreme temperatures of artificial turfs. There are research studies showing that they can reach 160 degrees during the height of summer and higher. Natural turfs can provide some ecological benefits. They tend to be monocultures, so even those Seashore and Paspalum and the St. Augustine that we promote here in the city, they do have lower ecological benefits than native planting ground covers like beach sunflower or coontie, but they do provide some, and they can have lower long-term maintenance requirements to retain permeability. Artificial turfs do need to be raked. The under drains do need to be cleared out and so on from time to time to retain that porosity. So in terms of the next steps, as I point out, there were 2 elements that the FDEP did leave to local code discretion when this rule goes into effect. Whether we require irrigation that is directed towards synthetic turf areas, and again, as I mentioned, the maximum subgrade permeability.
Maximum or minimum?
It's maximum,
Oh.
10 inches per. It needs to be permeable, but they don't set a floor, they set a maximum.
Okay.
Staff does recommend leaving the current regulations on multifamily and commercial properties, limiting synthetic turf to 20% of the required permeable area. That usually requires green space of about 12 to 20%, depending on commercial property location in the city, they would still need to provide that vegetative ground cover. It also cannot currently interfere with drainage features or cause adverse impact to required buffer areas on multifamily and commercial properties. We recommend leaving that as is. We would like the planning board's input on this item, whether you have any desire to change standards for multifamily and commercial properties. Would you like to require removal of sprinklers that service turf areas? It can be a good way to cool the surface, but it does remove the water-saving benefits. It may increase plastic runoff if irrigation remains in turfed areas. And would you like us to set a maximum subgrade permeability? You may not be able to answer these questions today. We can definitely bring back more information. We're just recently learning of this rule as well. Following input, likely not next month, but in the forthcoming months, we will draft an ordinance for recommendation to address these items that we are eligible to still regulate. Happy to get the board's input.
Why would we want a maximum?
Yeah. I didn't get that.
Potentially, especially with the use of French drains, if we want to control the runoff toward either the street or the water, that's the only thing I can think of. I assume that's probably a lot more valuable in areas that have citywide drainage features where they want to control that infiltration rate. But
I know when we did this, I spent a lot of time doing research on all the pros and cons, and I thought we did a pretty thorough review. And I think the recommendations that we brought forward were really a synthesis of best practices. We looked at all these different cities and what they did. I feel at this point, I almost feel like I need to wait and see what the state does, because, we don't know what the final product will be, and then do a reconciliation between what we decided we wanted that was optimal and how close to that we can get. So I definitely don't feel prepared to talk about that today. I was very disappointed to see it because I didn't feel they did as thorough a review as we did with what they came up with. But, we are where we are. So my suggestion would be that we wait till they finish what they're doing and then we see where we can go from there.
understood.
So the status of the proposed rule was published in January 20th this year, so just a little bit less than a month ago, and there was a public hearing February 11th at DEP in Tallahassee, an in-person hearing. So sometimes after those hearings, they'll make modifications, so we might see some modifications to the proposed rule before it becomes a final rule. And then sometimes the final rules get challenged in a rule challenge, and that can drag it out while there's an administrative hearing on it.
If it does get dragged out, would it be an opportunity for us to go ahead and put in what we did come up with, or is that just not?
You'd have to wait until the final
Okay.
rule, until the administrative law judge makes a ruling on a challenge.
And we can definitely still, what the planning board worked on, the quality standards, the the other related permeability standards, those can still be implemented and adopted, potentially post Senate Bill 180, but those are things we can definitely look at for commercial and multifamily properties. This is specifically a preemption only on single family.
Right.
So that's true.
That's a good point.
Do we have any prohibitions on sprinklers and artificial turf on commercial properties right now?
Not currently, no.
Okay. So if someone wanted to, surround their pool with artificial turf and have water spraying on it constantly to keep it walkable, that's not prohibited, commercial or residential? Okay.
Not currently, no.
Yeah, I mean, until we see the final, I don't really have opinion, but, I don't really want to see someone just watering their yard constantly so they can walk on it barefoot. But I'll save that for when we have a real rule.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, final discussion item 5D, CRA.
Pull up that single. So last week at the city commission meeting, I'm sorry, that was earlier this week, They accepted the finding of necessity study for the Community Redevelopment Area Agency. That is the first step in the process. These follow a pretty standard template. So that is effectively finding that there are criteria based on these statutory requirements that the city is potentially eligible for a community redevelopment area. The next step in the process, it's one that we are working on currently, is issuance of a request for proposals. This would involve selecting of a consultant and commencing development of the community redevelopment area agency plan. This is where the city really gets more into the details, not only on there being a justification for this type of community redevelopment area, but this is more details on how will revenue be generated, what are the needs of the city. I think our focus has been primarily on infrastructure and the significant infrastructure demands for the city, where are those located, and how are we going to go about resolving those with either tax increment financing funding or some other mechanism or combination of mechanisms. That's where the detail of that really comes together. From that, once the plan is prepared, there is engagement, outreach with stakeholders. We move from that onto coordination with Pinellas County. The City Commission would be the first entity to adopt the plan, and this is looking way out. This is months on from now. From there, it moves on to the county. The county has the ability, not the obligation, but the ability to authorize a tax increment financing for some portion of the ad valorem that goes to them. And then from there would be a county resolution and ordinance. Not too prepared to speak on the details of the actual plan at this time. I know that this board will be engaged once we have more details on how that's going to shape together. I just wanted to let you know that on Tuesday, the finding of necessity, which was really that first step, was accepted by the commission 5-0, and we are moving forward with that.
The community engagement portion, that's to get feedback on what people would like to see go into the project plan for that money to be spent on. Is that accurate?
It's a presentation of the draft plan, and correct, more a confirmation of those
Okay.
expenditures.
Any questions? All right, great. That was our final item. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.